Welcome, everyone, to Thursday Night Live with Aish New York. My name is Rabbi Elliot Matthias. Thursday Night Live is our weekly program where we deal with different topics facing the world, facing the Jewish people, interesting things where we intersect the modern world with Judaism. Tonight, we have a powerful, powerful story to share with you. And I think it's a story that touches on many core issues, core values. One of them I was thinking about is the idea of anger. You know, there's an idea in Judaism, in the ethics of our fathers. It says that a person should not anger easily. A person should not get angry easily. It doesn't say you shouldn't get angry. It says you shouldn't get angry easily. And what I learned from that is that there are things worth getting angry about. The question is, what do we get angry about? In a certain way, there's other things that as well define us, but one of the things that defines us is what gets us angry. A number of years ago, I was at a friend's house, was having dinner, and it was time for the meal was over, and he went back into his bedroom, and I heard him scream from his bedroom, "Who got ice cream on my suit jacket?" And it was sort of funny because he has little kids, you know, we were eating dinner together. He took his suit jacket, put it back in his bedroom. He was hoping that was safe away from the dining room table. And somehow one of the kids, or I guess I don't know if it was one of the kids, I assume it was one of the kids, brought the ice cream into his bedroom to get his jacket dirty. And he was pretty upset. But the question is, what gets us upset? Does ice cream on our suit jacket get upset? Someone cuts us off, you know, on the street. Is that what gets us angry? What gets us angry? Or are there certain aspects of injustice? When we see things are immoral, is that what gets us angry? The Torah's Judaism is teaching us there are certain things worth getting angry about, and there's certain things for sure we shouldn't get angry about. And what gets us angry in a certain way, again, defines who we are. Our guest tonight is someone, when you hear her story, anger is a part of it, something that she could be angry, and I'm sure at certain times in her path, anger was one of the emotions she dealt with, but there's been many more. We're really, really excited tonight to have Kay Wilson joining us. Kay, just tell you a little bit about her before we bring her on. Kay is a tour guide, a pianist, a cartoonist, and a motivational speaker. She actually lives in Israel. It's not in her bio, but I've come to learn that she's also has quite a sense of humor. And now being, I think it's about 3 o'clock in the morning in Israel, I have a feeling that sense of humor is going to really come out. We really appreciate her joining us at 3 o'clock in the morning in Israel. Let me tell you a little bit more about Kay. She's going to tell you her story. So I'm not going to go into all the details. But in 2010, Kay and her American friend, Christine Lukin, were attacked by two Palestinian terrorists. Unfortunately, her friend Christine did not survive. Kay did, thank God, and she has moved forward with her life, addressing a variety of audiences all over the world, talking about her ordeal. She has become a representative of an organization called Palestinian Media Watch, which lobbies Western governments to end foreign aid to terrorism. She's done TED Talks. She's spoken at the United Nations. She's been interviewed on radio and television. She's really moved forth in getting her message out there, talking about what happened to her, but also trying to create a productive way forward in order for other people to learn and to move forward in a productive way. She's written a book called The Rage Less Traveled, and we're excited tonight to have Kay Wilson joining us. So we're going to bring her on stage. Welcome, Kay.
Hello there, Rabbi Elliot. Hello, you New Yorkers.
You got your double espresso coffee, or what's keeping you up at 3 a.m.?
You don't have Red Bull in the States, do you? This is like my 4th Red Bull in 20 minutes, but we're good.
Okay, fantastic. Good. Well, we really, really appreciate you joining us anytime, but certainly at this time in the middle of the night to come tell your story to our Aish New York audience.
Thank you. It's a real privilege to get to address Aish.
Thank you. So why don't we just start by us telling you a little bit about yourself? I can a little bit tell by your accent that you're probably not originally from Israel. Maybe just tell us a little about your background, and most I'd like to hear how did you get to Israel, and why did you move to Israel?
Okay, well, you're right. It's an accent. Some people call it a speech impediment, but it's actually a British accent. I came to Israel. I made Aliyah in the mid-'80s. I wish I had some kind of pious, religious, noble, ultra-Zionist reason But frankly, growing up under slate grey skies in the United Kingdom, and I was bored. I have to be honest. I just never saw myself as sitting around drinking cups of tea. I was young, hard to believe, but once I was young, and I decided I want adventure. I was reading about Zionism. I wanted to be part of my people. And I made Aliyah. I made Aliyah when I was 20. It's like the bit from The Wizard of Oz, you know, when Dorothy spends her life in boring old Kansas. Sorry if anyone from Kansas is watching. And then she suddenly arrives over the rainbow in a world of color. And that's what it was like for me when I came to Israel. It was like, wow, everything was so vibrant, you know, from growing up. Kids in Britain, when I was growing up, they could be seen and not heard. And I get to Israel, and it's a place where babies can argue before they can walk. It was like, this is where I want to be. Honey, I'm home type thing. So no regrets.
You know, I don't want to foreshadow too far, but before you came to Israel, had you heard, I mean, obviously you heard, but what were your thoughts about terrorism? Were you ever afraid to go? Like, did that enter your mind at all before you moved to Israel?
Not at all. Look, also, I made Aliyah in 86, okay? And that's even before the first Intifada. So, like, terrorism, apart from the few hijacking of planes by the PLO, it wasn't very prominent. It never crossed my mind. Absolutely never crossed my mind. I couldn't wait to get here.
Wow. Amazing. Amazing. Okay. So maybe can you tell us a little bit about, you know, that fateful day and in 2010, and just walk us through it and tell us a little bit about what happened.
Okay, sure. So to backtrack a little bit, Rabbi Elliott, as a result of this love affair I had with Israel and just feeling so passionate about my country, I decided to become a tour guide. I felt, we're talking about intifadas. During the second Intifada, Israel was getting such bad press. It was atrocious. And that's when I decided I was going to train to be a tour guide. So as a result of getting my license, I was especially keen to guide non-Jewish people. And in December 2010, I was with an American client, a friend, an American Christian, Christine Lucan. It's Shabbat. We're on the Israel Trail on our side of, you know, the political line. There's Israeli families around. We're hiking through a forest on the trail. And when we're having a little snack, I see in the distance, about 60 feet down the hill, I see something catches my eye. And I realize it's two men in the bushes. And I, having already been in Israel at that point for 25 years, I mean, I got Arab friends, Palestinians, and I could see they were Palestinians. I hope they hadn't seen us. One stands up and he asks me in Hebrew if I have water. And I answer him back in Hebrew, like, Alavai, I wish, and they go away. I'm feeling uneasy. I suspect a robbery. So I told my friend we need to get back to the car. I didn't want to worry her. We're walking back through the forest. I took out my little penknife just in case they're going to come and grab my back. She's behind me. She screams. When I turn around, one pounces on me. I'm fighting him on the ground. I stab him in the nuts, but he's bigger than me. Takes my penknife and hoists me to my feet, and then begins half an hour in one of the most beautiful places in Israel. You know, it's fragrant pines and birds singing, and we're held at knife point by two men wielding machetes. And in the beginning, I pretend I'm a tourist, having forgotten I'd spoken to him in Hebrew. And then he finds my Israeli ID. And like I said, this is about after half an hour. And my friend hasn't said anything. I think she's just so terrified. Well, me too. But so he tells me now in Hebrew. Now he knows I'm Israeli. He says to me in Hebrew, Toridi na'alaim. So I take off my shoes. Then he tells me to take out my laces. They tie our hands behind the back. They gag us with her fleece. So the two of us are standing gag bound barefoot. They're making phone calls. I understand some Arabic, and I think, well, I could hear they're talking about a car. I suspect a kidnapping, and at that point, I still don't know how to articulate what I felt. And then they separate us by 5 feet, 6 feet. And instead of pushing us through the thicket to some waiting car, they push us on the knees, they say Allahu Akbar, and they start slaughtering. I fall to the ground and he's leaning on me, and every time, I don't want to like gross people out, I think it's your breakfast time, but I mean, he's hitting me with this jagged, it's going in, he's piercing my skin with this jagged knife, and he's doing it so hard my bones are crunching, and the only thing I know to do is play dead. And I'm, please God, just give me the strength not to move. And to play dead, I kept my eyes open and I watched the other man, you know, hack up my friend. And they came back to check I'm dead. They stabbed me just above the heart. And then I had one last commission in life, which was to die near away of the park where I parked the car so the police could find my body. And I managed to stand. I turned my back on what's left of Christine. And just step by step, I begin to walk. And gag bound barefoot, I had 13 machete wounds, 30 broken bones, dislocated shoulder, crushed sternum, broken shoulder blade. I don't mean to fetch, you know, it's just one of those things. And gag bound barefoot, I managed to get back to help to where I parked the car. Just to sum up the events, I was nearly dead, really clearly nearly dead. My lungs were filling with blood. And because I stabbed the terrorist, that little prick of the knife, little tiny knife, his DNA on my sleeve led to a very, very quick apprehension of them. I had a very long physical recovery. I only got up for court cases. I was pretty much 3 years needing help to get out of bed. Physically, trauma therapy was extensive, a number of years. But 9 months after the murder, I was in court because they were arrested. And this is what I say when I go speaking. First of all, I tell people it was an Arab Muslim Israeli who saved my life. Arab Muslim Israeli surgeon saved my life. Secondly, in court, when the judge looks at them and he says, but why did you murder an American Christian, Christine Lucan? And I won't forget it. An Israeli TV documented it and made it into a 45-minute film. The terrorist says, oh, we thought she was Jewish. So that's the essence of what I do, is to say that an American Christian was slaughtered in cold blood because their executioners thought she was Jewish. They didn't say free Palestine. They didn't talk about the political situation. It was an extension of a pogrom. And the other thing is to, you know, just to remind people that part of our population here in Israel are the Arab community, and there's some very, very noble people.
Wow. I mean, my first reaction, okay, is just thank God you're here and you're healthy and you're with us, and that's a shocking story. And I mean, obviously, it's been 10 years, and I feel already in listening to you, you've told the story, and you're now on with your life, and you're doing so many amazing things, and obviously that's sort of boosted you to do so many amazing things. And I don't want to dwell on the incident as much, but just and maybe it was nothing besides survival during the incident, during the time. What was going through your head, if anything? I know you've mentioned to me before when we talked, talking about, where was God, or was any of that going on then, or was that all much after the fact?
Well, in the moment of the murder itself, when the knife is going in me, first of all, the pain, all right? I'm trying to do pain management. Did I just touch my face? I'm sorry. Just trying to do pain management and not move, okay? Because I don't want to give away that I'm still alive. So it's so much was happening in those few seconds. One is I was praying to God, and I'm not a particularly pious person. It's funny, when you know you're going to die, suddenly God becomes very relevant. But I'm saying, God, please, let him stab me in a different place, because I can't take the pain anymore. And then I'm thinking, I'm 46 years old. I can't believe I'm being murdered. I mean, death had barely crossed my mind at that age. And then, of course, I'm witnessing this somewhat sacred sight before me of a human being murdered. And it's interesting you're saying that, Rabbi Elliot, because it just crossed my mind now. I knew I was looking at something, looking at the murder of Christine. I understood that I was looking at something we weren't created to see. There was something, of course, it was barbaric, but there was something very sacred. It was like, take off your shoes you're on holy ground. You know, I knew it was like voyeurism. I shouldn't be looking. I shouldn't be looking. It was on another level. I can't describe it. I'm sorry for being so clumsy with the wording.
I think it's powerful. I think, you know, sometimes the ultimate goodness, the ultimate holiness, you can see it when it's contrasted with the opposite. Not to get off topic, but a number of years ago, you know, for the first time, I went a number of times, but I went to Poland. And I remember the first time I was in Auschwitz, and when you actually go into the gas chamber, and literally I described it to people, and like you said, it's clumsy. I don't know how to say it, but I literally felt like I was at the Western Wall. I felt like I was so close to God, because that contrast of good and evil is so clear that you almost also see the other side. And I guess that sort of leads me to my next question, which is, I mean, not many of us see evil directly. I mean, we read about it, we hear about it, we've read it. Do you feel like you saw evil? Did this incident change your views about good and evil, what real evil is? Do you believe in evil? Do you not? I mean, how do you think about that? Or evil and hatred, maybe those go together. Did you see hatred? Do you believe that something, did it change your views about those topics?
I don't know that I had any views before. I mean, I don't know. I think I've just like breezed my life away. You know, it's not like I was diligently intellectual or anything like this. I loved playing the piano. I loved nature. I loved going for hikes. I like a good glass of wine. I love my friends. That was my life. So I hadn't given much thought to this. When it comes to evil, I mean, there's so much to talk about, really, isn't there? But it's not a case of if I believe in evil. It exists. I mean, even if I go back to the forest, all right, there's a duality about life, about our existence. I mean, I can hear him grunting. I can hear Christine, you know, whimpering. And over it all, I can hear little birds chirping. You know, I can smell. I mean, I threw up behind the gag. I could smell the bile. And then when my nostrils come out of the mask, I can smell the pines. I mean, there's always this and that. It's being able to hold these things in tension. And so there's that with the good and evil. So definitely I believe in it. Now, regarding the terrorists, of course, it's savage behavior. I won't call them animals. I've never called them animals. And that's not because, you know, I want to be nice to all human beings. I hate their guts, and we'll talk about that later. But I understand, from my understanding of a very, very elementary understanding of Judaism, people aren't born evil. It's a matter of choice. Judaism is always about choice, right? And so somehow, as I see it, these two people, why don't I call them animals? Because it exempts them from responsibility. These two people have made choices along their way. All right, maybe it starts off with a little white lie. I mean, I know if I do a little white lie, it's so much easier to lie again. If I allow myself to say something really mean about, or something just a little mean about someone, next time it's easier to, you know, we get away with murder. Terrible metaphor in my case, but this is what happens. I think evil is a choice. It's a result of successive choices that a person makes. And it exists, as I understand it, alongside, you know, with beauty and the divine.
Sort of the same thing we were just talking about. The contrast is within that choice as well.
Mm.
So first of all, before we go to the next thing, I just want to mention to all our viewers that you can ask questions tonight to Kay. If you want to send an email, you can see it scrolling down below. If you want to send an email to info@aishny.com, send an email to info@aishny.com, and a little later on, we'll take a few questions from some of our audience members. We can't take everyone's question, but if you do have a question for Kay, please send that on. So after, you mentioned, it was interesting, before the incident, you were a little bit, weren't thinking seriously about some of the serious issues. You moved to Israel, so obviously I think you were idealistic, but it seems, from what I understand, is after the incident, you sort of became an activist. At what point did you, I would say, get clarity, or when did you think about how you wanted to take what happened to you and move forward with it as an activist? And how did you go through the process of deciding what you wanted to do with it?
It just, as most things in my life happened, it one thing followed another. Nothing was like intentional. I didn't get up one day and think, oh, I'm going to be an activist. It's like I never thought, oh, I'm going to go to Israel in that respect. It just, things snowballed, and I found myself in the Middle East for 30 years. But what I think the process is really interesting, what you're asking, because I knew for my own sanity that what had happened to me, and of course to Christine, there were huge moral issues, philosophical issues. I mean, I'd be the same, all right? If I didn't know what happened to me, I'd be the same with someone else. Like, what do you say to someone in my position? And I think when tragedy happens or when terrible things happen, human nature is such that we all have also the goodness in us to try and advise, to try and help. And cliches, when somebody, it doesn't have to be terrorism, anyone who's suffering, a broken relationship, I don't know, but cliches become very empty. Albeit well meaningful. And people used to start saying, not everyone, but like at some point they said, look, you got to let it go for you, got to let it go. And I thought, what's happened to me is so important, and it has generational implications. I cannot let it go. So when did things change? The other issue that came up for me, and it didn't happen with Jewish friends, mostly with Christians, this idea of forgiveness, all right? Forgiveness. And it always used to make me very angry when people implied that maybe I should forgive. And just for clarity here, Jews, just for clarity, I do not forgive. I will not forgive, because it's not mine to forgive. All right, and we should hate evil. We should hate those who murder and maim, okay, because they steal goodness from the world. And hate, we can talk about that in a minute. It's not necessarily visceral. It's also an intellectual decision sometimes. So I do not and will not forgive. I cannot forget. But I also made that choice not to live the rest of my life in hatred or fear towards innocent people. And by allowing myself, this is the process, by directing my rage or anger or loss at only the people who did it, the terrorists, plus the Palestinian Authority, plus the Western governments who give them a salary, by directing and limiting what feels to be negativity, it's opened up my world to other Arab, Muslim, and Palestinians. And I am very honored to say I'm very highly thought of in those particular communities. And what helped me with that process, I mean, only a Jew would think like this, right? What helped me in this process was an article I came across by Soloveitchik, the grandson, Me'el Soloveitchik. And it wasn't so much the article, it was the title. And it was so striking in such a snowflake world. And it was called, I'm sure you've read it, Rabbi Elliot, The Virtue of Hate. The Virtue of Hate. Now, the tochen, the content was a little bit more about Judaic values compared with Christian values. But I thought, as a chutzpah, what a nerve to call this article as such. And I started to understand, and this is how I got here today, that hating evil is a virtue. And it's not just a virtue, it's a moral necessity. So it's a very, very long process, but it's a separation. It's lavdil, that's what we Jews do. We separate, we distinguish, we make holy. We sanctify time, we sanctify the week, we sanctify our relationships, so it's a kind of a sanctification process for me. That yes, I must speak out against evil. I do not love them. I don't feel anything towards them anymore. I feel neutral, but my choice of hatred is a choice of justice. It's a justice thing now.
Amazing.
I'm sorry, that was a very long answer. But it summarized 9 years.
It's amazing, and really, not to repeat myself, but my earlier comments at the very beginning is, in some ways, people are defined by what they hate. When you hate evil, when you hate injustice, in a certain way, that defines what's important to you and what you stand for in this world. What gets you.
We're also defined by what we love.
Also, yes.
Listen, you mentioned the Talmud earlier on, and I don't want to pretend I know the Talmud. I know a few sentences from Pirkei Avot and all this, but there's one that was also very helpful to me, Rabbi Elliot, very, very well known, and I think it was the most brilliant. You could write encyclopedias about this. He who is cruel to the kind shall be kind to the cruel. That should be in a manual for every single person on the face of this earth who has suffered injustice from another human being. He who is kind to the cruel shall be cruel to the kind, or the other way around. I mean, what wisdom. It's absolutely fabulous.
Have you found, I'm wondering, in now, whether in telling your story or becoming an activist against evil, against cruelty, against terrorism, have you ever faced, well, it's unbelievably terrible what's happened to you, but you have to understand, these people are desperate. These people, do people ever, have you heard that in your activism? And if so, how do you deal with that?
Yes, I have. Not very much, because usually, you're going to look like a real jerk. People don't want to look bad, but if after hearing my story, they're going to challenge me, they're more worried about their own image. I was speaking in Jerusalem a few months ago to a group from UCLA, and it's the first time it happened. And I was literally lynched afterwards. I was accused of white supremacy. I was accused of Islamophobia. That was a one-off. How did I handle that? It was like a rabbit in headlines. I was so stunned, and then I could feel the anger, but I keep my anger in. It's not like I go around throwing eggs at wall. And then I just said, you should be ashamed of yourself. I want an apology. And as I found myself talking. And so I walked out and I said, I'm not staying any longer. Now, the other thing is, like you say, you should understand, but. So I say, well, loss and hardship in any human being is very difficult. I mean, I've lost my friend, I lost my health. I lost the expectancy of a long life. I lost my dignity to provide myself. I lost my innocence. I lost the sense of the mundane. I lost the ability to ever think that I could return to be a normal functioning human being. I mean, the losses are huge. So I tell them my losses, and then I say, but and it's very frustrating, but as a result of my frustrations, I haven't gone around pouncing on Arabs, tying them up and then hacking them to death. And if I haven't done it, why does somebody get the benefit of the low expectations? I mean, how dare we do this to people? That's racism. When we're judging someone not capable of rising above themselves, we instead of empowering them, what is noble about victimhood? That victimhood, no Jew, no Jewish person, no Israeli ever came to me and congratulated me for being a so-called terror victim. because it's not kind, helpful, noble, or true. It's like, okay, you can't be a tour guide. You can't really get out. Let's think about how we're going to put this mosaic back together. So why should I then champion the victimhood of somebody else? I find it obscene.
Okay, we like I mentioned, we're not going to take everyone's questions, but I have a question that they're gonna bring up, which is after the incident, did you become afraid to live in Israel?
I only became afraid.
I'll add my part B, which did you ever think about leaving?
I thought about leaving, but not through fear. I had first of all, it was at the time where there was the prisoner exchange with Gilad Shalit, and I was my terrorists. What a terrible thing to say. They were sentenced, and then a few weeks later there was this prisoner exchange, and I was so terrified that they would be on the list. I concocted a plan to leave because I wasn't scared that they'd come after me with a knife. I just felt it was like the ultimate betrayal. Where you fall in love or you get married and then your partner just, it was a betrayal. And I felt I could not live in Israel if Israel didn't respond with unrequited love. So I did concoct that. I wasn't afraid because of anything else. We have to be brutally honest because because we're all family. Israel is not an easy place either. It's not easy. It's vibrant. It's wonderful. The everyday challenges, let's call it that. People if they put their hand on the horn, they're at a stoplight and it's like a game contestant show. They think by pressing the horn, the light's going to change color. Men take a pee on the side of the road. Like, these things drive me mad. People don't arrive on time. So that's kind of thing that wears me down here. But that's not enough to make me leave. People who drive too slow in the fast lane, people who espouse country music as a jazz musician, all this kind of thing. These are the things that get me down. But terrorism, no. I think for me, that would be, for me, I would never, ever leave now because of the terrorist attack. Right. As we say, honey, I'm home. It's like my vengeance is to choose life. My vengeance is to stay here. My vengeance is to speak well of my people. And I say this as well when I speak, and I'll say it again. It's probably the only smart thing I've ever said. Evil has not ever made me cry. I have never fallen apart because of evil. Kindness has made me weep. All right. And I have experienced goodness and kindness from people of all walks of life in this country and outside in the wider Jewish community as well. Time doesn't heal. That's just bull. Sorry, live TV. That's just not true. Kindness doesn't heal. Kindness heals. Time doesn't heal.
Maybe that's beautiful, and this is amazing. I think just thinking based on that, you gave sort of advice before, or you made a statement of what was bad advice you got. Just time to move on. It's time to move on with your life. You got to put it behind you. Have you, especially certainly soon after or in the process of your recovery, was there specifically good advice you got from people or things you've learned when you've met? I assume you've probably interacted with other people who were terror victims and have a crazy bond, a bond that no one would ask for. But have you found there's certain advice or certain sentiments that you found were effective when people spoke to you that you appreciated, or you tried to tell other people?
Yes. First of all, I want to clarify. I think the advice, it wasn't so much advice. When people would look at me, I perceived they were terrified. They were looking at me and thinking, oh my gosh, if it can happen to her, all right, it could happen to me. I mean, it creates an angst in everyone. So I think when these things happen, if we look at the book of Eov, the guy, I always call Job a drama queen. I'm thinking, you lost a few fields, you had a few spots. It's like, you haven't been hacked to death. Get over it, all right? But that's my perception of the book of Job. But if I look at Job and his friends, what did they do? Those first 7 days, they were there. They didn't say anything. That was how to comfort some people. So for me, and like I said, I wouldn't know any different. It's not like I'm I'm here to give advice. What was helpful to me, people would just be friends. They'd bring over a bottle of wine, ridiculous with all the painkillers I had, or they just sit there, or they'd bring a newspaper, or, like, there was no advice. And they also, I think, which was very, very helpful, they didn't ask me what I needed, because that was too overwhelming. I didn't even know what my name was some days. I was so traumatized. So just to be a friend. And I don't want to come across like I'm criticizing people, because people did the best, and 90% of it was absolutely fabulous. And I wouldn't have known any better either. I've learned through this.
Yeah, of course, people have good intentions, but it's also good to hear from someone who's been, unfortunately been through.
I'll tell you one more, Rabbi Elliot. I'll tell you one more. And I'm not dismissing the divine or anything. This tends to come more from like the Jewish community, and the Christians, the devout, pious Christians. They'll say things like, well, you survived, so God clearly has a plan, right? Or God had a plan. God helped you to survive. Now, that might be true. I don't know. I do have Modani Lefanecha, Melech Chai V'Kayam, on my wrist, so I can be thankful that I'm here. But that kind of stuff, although I'm saying it could be true, that makes me uncomfortable, because I usually answer that. I say, well, you know what? People have been murdered. People have died. My friend died. I wouldn't feel comfortable if you told me that in the presence of my friend's parents. So I think when it comes to the supernatural, no, that's a terrible word, like celestial, these issues of heaven, I think sometimes it would be, there are things that we should just keep to ourselves, you know, and thank God that we're still here, that we still have life to do his work.
Beautiful. So you obviously have a strong sense of humor, and I could see people in a circumstance of what you've dealt with becoming very serious, very I don't even say negative, but serious. Did you always have a sense of humor? Has your sense of humor changed based on the experiences that you've had, and how does humor help you at this point in your process of moving forward?
Okay, well, have I always had a sense of humor? I am the funniest person I know. I have always had a sense of humor, and also very British. It's not a slapstick thing, all right? It's very dry, very. One thing that it does for me, especially if I'm speaking in public, all right, I found that to use humor in the right place when I'm speaking is helpful, not just to me, because it's helpful to the audience, because I'm going to stand up, I'm going to tell them this terrible story. People don't know what to say. It's all very awkward. So if I appear as normal as possible, that's got a very wide Parshonut. But if I appear as normal and as approachable as possible, I feel it's helpful for the audience too. Okay, because they're not looking at some weirdo being touched by an angel, escaped the angel of death. It's just a human being. Now, the other thing, I do it for me too, because you can't live in that place of just this darkness. I don't want to live there. My rage, I hope you did this, Rage Less Trouble. Like I said, rage is now it's not a feeling. I'm completely neutral about it. But humor has always been a way that we as a people have coped and morphed and managed to cope with our situations. I mean, the best humor in the world is Jewish humor. I just finished reading a book actually called Humor in the Holocaust. And I know when I'm with other survivors of terrorism, we hardly talk about terrorism. It's like, oh, it becomes boring. It becomes boring. And I think that's a sign of healing. That's a sign of healing. But we do allow ourselves, I think it's like Holocaust survivors. There must be so many in jokes there. You know, I survived this. Oh, you only had one gas chamber. I've heard survivors talk like that. But with survivors of terrorism, we can allow ourselves this blackness in humor, not in mood. I have a friend, his wife, also British. He was British Israeli. His wife and him and his child were shot when they were in a car, and his wife was murdered beside him. His kid took a bullet in her back, as did he. The two of them survived. They're in a wheelchair, and you know, the conversation will go like this. It will, if he's public speaking, and he'll say to me, "Oh, shut up, you've only been stabbed." You know what I mean? And I say, "Oh, shut up, your wife was only murdered." I mean, these are things that can't say this, but we do, and we end up laughing. And there's something and nothing is funny about it. And we would never laugh at someone else's misfortune. It's a kind of a Woody Allen thing, you know? Humor has helped our people survive. And if I have the last laugh, you know, I want you guys, do me a favor, Ish, get this video translated into Arabic and then screen it in their sniveling little prison cells, all right? And then they'll see us Jews laughing. That's my revenge. I want justice, but that's my revenge. Life is the best revenge for death that there is.
Beautiful. So you've spoken at the UN. You've given TED Talks. You've really had an opportunity to get your message out. What would you say is your central message? You have your opportunity to. I mean, you've said a lot tonight, and I think you've had some profound messages that affected us all. But if you would sort of encapsulate it in one message, what do you feel is the most important message that you want to communicate to people?
Aside from the stop funding terrorism, aside from the incitement in the Palestinian Authority and all of this, my message is a very human message. Rabbi Elliot, you're going to allow me just 45 seconds. This is my message, okay? And upon all this is based my ever-changing, molding, developing philosophy. I'm just going to read you one paragraph. I've got up. Christine is murdered, and this is my walk back through the forest, okay? And I'm gagged, bound, barefoot. I've got bones sticking out of me. Cold rips through my bones. It's like being in a fridge. There's so little air. I could be breathing through a straw. Thistles rip my ankles. Thorns pierce my feet. With my tongue, I try to loosen the bits of acidic vomit caked to the roof of my mouth and open up a bigger airway. Faces of the people I love appear in the gnarled tree trunks. They are contorted with grief. The branches become their arms and claw at my clothes. They're holding me back from my grave. To think that I will never see them again or hug them or tell them that I love them sends shudders through my body. It's too late to say the things I never had the courage to say. Never again will I hear the howl of the wind or laughter or music or see the endless ocean and the desert massifs. My home, my land, my life, and those that I love have come to an end. That's my message. You know what I'm going through that Gates al Mavid, how do you say? The valley of the shadow of death. You know, there's no shadow without light, but it was a lesson of what's important in life. You know, we always kind of live today, but with our eye on the future. What are we going to do when the corona ends? What are we going to do when this happens? And this moment now, look, Chai, why do we have Chai? This moment now is really effectively all we have. Meaning, this conversation with you, Rabbi Elliot, and all these amazing Aish people who I wish I could see every single one of you and give you a hug. Oh, sorry, religious hug, you know, like a virtual hug.
Coronavirus hug.
Corona hug. That's what you guys do. You do corona hugs. I'm not into corona hugs. But it's okay. But like this moment, this is what we have. This is the gift from God that we have. So I've learned that, like, make the most of every moment. And I've also learned that as Jews, we always have something to be thankful for. all right? And it's our commission to be a light unto the nations. But as Jews, we're a community. We are a community. We're a people. We're a nation. And it's that kind of interaction. When I see all the people who've helped me and they've held my hands, I can't believe I'm talking to a rabbi, you know? I mean, well, I was 25 years in Tel Aviv. I don't think I ever saw a rabbi. Rabbis are always scary. Look how far I've come. I mean, you're not scary, all right? But look how it's like my world has been destroyed, but it's been opened up. So that's my message. You know, we're a community. We need a little bit more wiggle room for each other. Let's not deprive ourselves from just staying with the people we're comfortable with. Let's be thankful for every moment, and let's just grasp that moment, that this moment is really all we have.
Amazing, amazing. Kay was just reading from her book. You can see it scrolling down below, The Rage Less Traveled. That's her website, www.theragelesstraveled.com. This is her book, The Rage Less Traveled. You can get it at Amazon. And we highly recommend that you go and check it out, because you know, what you're hearing tonight obviously can go much more in depth into the book, which so please go check out her book and learn much more about Kay. I'm just gonna ask you one last question, and then we're gonna have to wrap up. You through your activism and through your message, and I would say more through some of your political activism that you talked about, have you seen change? Have you seen in any of your activism that people have changed their opinions, that it's made a difference in funding, in trying to stop terrorism? Have you seen change?
Yes, absolutely. Just before I was kind of active. Look, I'd been, along with many other people who'd been doing this a lot longer than me, I'd been lobbying for the defunding of the Palestinian Authority, and still until they stopped paying terrorist money. And in the previous American administration, I never got, I wrote several emails. I never even got one response. With this current president, President Trump, he stopped. One of the first things he did was like, he's not going to fund the Palestinian Authority if they're going to reward cold-blooded murderers. I was like at the end of a chain on all of that. What I did have an influence on, I went with Palestinian Media Watch and Itamar Marcus, went to the Dutch government, spoke to the Dutch government. Itamar brought all the facts, and I want to be really frivolous and say I took off my shirt and showed them my stab wounds, but I showed photographs. I told them what happened. I said it was the Christian who was murdered because they thought she was Jewish. And the Dutch people, they first of all, they suspended the funds and they cut down, and then they stopped them. There's progress with Denmark. There's progress with Sweden, with Canada. It's really like, how do you say? It's a lot of finicky work. Okay, but I wouldn't want to take credit. I'm the mouthpiece, right? There's people who are behind this who are so devoted. I get all the, all this stardom because I just turn up as a stabbing queen. But there is definitely progress. There's progress, and thank God there's progress.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Kay.
Thank you, Rabbi M.
Yeah, The Rage Less Traveled. Please go check out Kay's book. Go to Amazon. Go to her website. We really appreciate that you joined us tonight. Like I said, that you're here, that you're healthy, that you're an inspiration, that you're able to impact other people. It's really amazing. So thank you so much for joining us. And we do have another guest. Sari Singer is with us here tonight, and we're really excited that she's just going to help us close the show tonight. Sari has an amazing story. She is from New Jersey. She worked a couple blocks away from the World Trade Center at 9/11 when 9/11 happened, and the tragedy of 9/11 really, I guess, impacted her and influenced her to move to Israel to be involved with helping victims of terror. While she was in Israel, and it's pretty unbelievable that it's exactly 17 years to the day. Is that correct, Sari? June 11th. Yeah. No, June 11th, 2003. while Sari was in Israel working to help victims of terror, she was on a bus in Jerusalem when an 18-year-old Palestinian terrorist dressed up as a religious Jew boarded the bus and blew it up. 17 people were killed. Over 100 people were injured. Sari was hospitalized, and obviously the trauma that incurred. She eventually came back to New Jersey to heal, and really her story became high profile. She's appeared on television, she's appeared on radio, she's testified before Congress. And I think in similar ways to what we just heard from Kay, she's someone who's decided to take her story and to bring light and to move forward and make a difference. And she's the founder and director of Strength to Strength, which is focusing on bringing together victims of terrorism from around the world and assisting them with their long-term psychological needs. We wanted to ask Sari just to come on tonight to talk a little bit about the ongoing struggle of victims of terror and how people can make a difference. So thank you very much, Sari, for joining us. And please, we're excited to hear what you have to say.
Well, thank you for having me. And the truth is that it's always inspiring to hear Kay and to hear her words because they resonate so much with me as well. We're actually good friends, and my only sadness and everything going on is that this coming summer, I won't be able to spend some time with her when I usually go to Israel to visit with a number of victims that I have strong relationships with. Everything that you heard from Kay is very, very similar to what many victims feel and what many victims are going through long term. And I always say that, especially on the anniversary today, which is a very difficult day for victims on their anniversaries. For me, I spent the day actually surrounded by work, but also Zoom calls with victims on our normal calls that we have, because in canceling our in-person events, we've had to sort of move ourselves into this area of online. So today we had an art class with some of our victims. We've had yoga classes, regular therapeutic, things going on for our victims. But we realized that an attack happens in an instant, but the impact lasts a lifetime. And the only way that we as victims can stop the hate and to really combat what we've been through is to come together and heal and help each other move forward with our lives. And that's really what the essence of Strength to Strength is. It's that terrorism is not one country's problem. It's a world problem. And all of us need to come together to combat that hate. And I always say that I had no control over what happened to me that day, but I do have control over how I live my life going forward. And I want to make sure that I'm living that life, spreading love and kindness, and doing the opposite of what that day was all about, which was pure hate. And as Kay spoke about the evil and the hate, I don't forgive as well. And there are many victims that we interact with around the world, and we talk about this idea of forgiveness. And there are many victims that need to forgive in order for them to heal. For me, I don't need to forgive the evil that made that day happen, the evil members of Hamas who indoctrinated and who radicalized a young 18-year-old boy to carry out an attack. What I need to do is not focus on the forgiveness part, but focus on what am I going to do with the time that I have left here. God gave me an opportunity to have a second chance. That's what I do believe. And everyone has their own belief system on why they survived. And we don't always understand that. But I do believe that I am the voice for those 17 innocent people on my bus that day that didn't get to go home to their families. And every time I share my story, I'm sharing their story and they're being remembered. And I think that, in figuring out what people can do. We work with victims in over 14 different countries around the world. And we work with existing organizations on the ground that are working with these families. So we work with families in Northern Ireland, in the UK, in Spain, in France, Algeria, Israel, Argentina, Colombia, Uganda, Kenya, Belgium. We work with an organization in Australia. And we also work within the U.S. with 9/11, Oklahoma City, Boston, San Bernardino. We've just started a little bit with the Pulse nightclub survivors. And the idea is that we are stronger together. And so we've built this community where victims feel, survivors and bereaved family members feel that they can have support and they can come to a place where people understand what they've been going through. And I just thank God every day that we have people around the world that support our cause and support the work that we're doing to be able to provide programming, to provide the support for these families so that hopefully the next generation is not impacted and traumatized the way their parents are for what they've been going through. And as I said, I feel very blessed for all the things that have happened from that day 17 years ago. I learned so much from it, so much kindness and so much good in that world. The people that saved me and took me off the bus and ran to the burning bus to save lives, to the doctors in the hospital at Hadassah and Kerem, who took care of me and saved my life, that when I go back every summer to Israel for vacation and I visit them, I'm not just a number or a patient. They remember me. They sit down with me and have a conversation and want to genuinely know what's going on in my life. And I'm forever grateful for them. And I always say the people of Israel saved my life that day and everything going forward. And I just feel like I need to pay that forward by helping others. And I also want to just comment on the work that Kay talked about in terms of stopping radicalization and indoctrination. It's so important that we as victims use our voice to make sure that terrorism cannot be perpetuated. And like Kay, I've done the same in speaking to different members of Congress here, but also overseas in the UK to members of parliament to stop them from funding terrorism in any way possible, to make sure that somebody else doesn't go through what I've gone through.
Very amazing. And I know personally, not only on this issue, which is such a central issue, but many issues dealing with Israel, dealing with the Jewish people, you are an activist and you're someone who is not only standing up, but getting other people to stand up. And that's an inspiration for all of us. And
thank you.
For this day, June 11th, for you to be here with us. I'm sure this is a day of many mixed emotions for you, but to hear your gratitude and to hear you're able to see that bigger picture of what you've been able to accomplish and what you call that sort of second chance is incredibly, incredibly inspiring. Strength to Strength, the Sari's organization. Please check it out. Thank you so much to Sari. Thank you so much to Kay. Next Thursday night, we'll be back here. 8 p.m. Eastern, 8 to 9 p.m. Eastern every Thursday night, H New York, Thursday Night Live. Go to our website, go to our Facebook page. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us tonight. Have a great night. Stay safe. Be well. Thank you.